Thank you, Lance. Welcome, everyone, to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. Today, we are pleased to present Performance Architecture with Alex Schweder. And I want to thank our partners for their support of today's program. We have Wasserman Projects, we have the Ann Arbor Art Center's PopX, and the 2016 Detroit Design Festival and Michigan Radio 91.7 FM. So big news of the day is, it's the first day of fall. It is the autumnal equinox. We are here teetering halfway between light and dark. And we're about to take that plunge into darkness, but don't worry because the Penny Stamps series is here to keep you warm and keep your path lit. And a perfect example of our interconnected nexus point connecting you to the greater cultural experiences available is our event today, as it is interconnected to no less than 3 events that are going on simultaneously today. Here in Ann Arbor, PopX, just down the street on Liberty. This is a 10-day outdoor exhibition of contemporary pop-up pavilions, interactive exhibitions and performances. The art pavilions are at Liberty Plaza. This is 1.5 blocks down on Liberty. And Alex has the hotel rehearsal, which is one of his pieces installed there at PopX. And so directly after the talk here, you should take a stroll down the street and see that. PopX is going on for 10 days. You can go to popxannarbor.com to get more information. Today's event is also part of the 2016 Detroit Design Festival, happening now through Sunday and celebrating Detroit's UNESCO City of Design designation with a special summit. I'm not sure if all of you are already aware, but Detroit is now the very first American city to be named a UNESCO City of Design. Yeah. This is an honor which recognizes a city's design legacy and commitment to promoting creative industries. Detroit's contributions to the global design community are certainly substantial, and it continues to play a significant role. The Detroit Design Festival events are going to be exploring ways in which design is shaping Detroit's future. And one of its signature events is happening tonight, Eastern Market After Dark, which is a very fun event, so perhaps you'll want to take a drive down to Detroit tonight. And as part of Eastern Market After Dark, it is including Wasserman Projects, a gallery in Eastern Market, is having their opening for artist Koen van Mechelen's Energy Mass. And this is introducing the 20th generation of the Cosmopolitan Chicken Project, which some of you may have heard of. This is considering humanity through the metaphor of genetically diverse chickens. This exhibition is going to run through December 17th, so you have time to see it, but you know, Eastern Market After Dark is an awful lot of fun. One hot stamp school tip for you tonight here, Liberty Secret world premiere. This is the new Girl Meets Girl musical political satire by Stamps faculty member Andy Kirshner. This is at 8 p.m. right here. There are still tickets available at the Michigan box office, so you can get them. So there's a lot of options for you folks, but hey, it's harvest time. So, veritable cornucopia. Please do remember to turn off your cell phones. We will have an irregular Q&A today. We will not be meeting in the screening room as per usual, but we will, directly following the talk, those of you with questions who want to meet Alex and see in person and experience one of his pieces should walk 1.5 blocks down on Liberty to Liberty Plaza, PopX, and you can meet Alex for a Q&A there. And now for a proper introduction of our guest today. We have none other, very busy man with a big day, the CEO of Allied Metals Corporation and the founder of Wasserman Projects, a Kunsthalle chamber concert space and gallery in Eastern Market. Please welcome Gary Wasserman.
So I'm an alum of this august institution. And I have never been in this building, or if I was in this building, I was in no condition to remember it. That's a question. And so when I came in here and I saw this organ playing, oh my God, I was overwhelmed. And on top of it, it's red, and to me, anything that's red can only be good. So it is my honor and pleasure to introduce you to Alex Schweder, a remarkable architect and artist and dear friend. We met more than 10 years ago when Alex participated together with Richard Barnes in an exhibition at Cranbrook during the time that the museum was under reconstruction. And so there was an art and science program that was done in the Cranbrook Science Museum. There was an installation there that was so memorable, it was so incredible to me. It was a room maybe 10 foot by 10 foot of just white, and projected on it were birds, just flocks of birds flying around. And it was in fact an image of the birds flying over the American Academy in Rome, and that was the first work of Alex's that I ever saw. And I had such a visceral reaction to that. When art moves me, I feel it physically right here. And I knew that there had to be a connection between me and that artist, and there certainly was, because from our first meeting, we became very good friends and have been so ever since. Alex has a august resume. He has had an exhibition at the Tate Modern in London, a performance renovation, which you'll hear about what performance architecture is in a moment. He has also just been, or rather one of his major pieces, the Counterweight Roommate, has been acquired by the Museum of Modern Art in New York and will be installed as a solo show in the Center Gallery at some date yet to be determined. There's the reconstruction of the museum going on. So, but hopefully that'll be within a year. Alex's undergrad is from Pratt, where he is an associate professor. He went to Princeton for his master's in architecture and Oxford for his PhD. He is also a recipient of the Rome Prize. This year, Alex Wasserman Projects presented Alex's show, Desire Bouncing, which featured an absolutely beautiful piece called Sound in the Future, an inflatable architecture robot that reconfigures the space of the dance floor as a response to techno's origin in Detroit. I encourage you all to go and see the hotel rehearsal. It's really fun. It has been in so many different museums, including the Philip Johnson Glass House, where it was placed in dialogue with the Glass House. So it is with that, it is my enormous pleasure to introduce Dr. Alexander Schweder.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I can't see any of you. I'm like, whoa, blinded by the light. I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. It's really an honor to be here. I want to thank Penny Stamps for her support of the lecture series, Christina Hamilton for her organization of the series, and Gary, who's just very close to my heart. So I'm going to talk about something I call performance architecture tonight. And I come from, as Gary spoke about, I come from a background of architecture. And with that background, I really didn't know what performance art was when I was in school. So I was at a bit of a disadvantage. I thought that performance art was, me running around the room kind of naked with some chickens and maybe a bit of chocolate, right? It still happens, but in other contexts. So performance art was something that was kind of, I don't know, it was just something I didn't think too much about. And then over the course of my career, once I started making my own work and having my own practice, what I realized is that performance artists work with everyday actions. That's actually their medium in a lot of cases. Not every performance artist works with everyday actions, but they've become incredibly good at it, and they've developed aesthetics around everyday actions They are able to do kind of aesthetic gymnastics with everyday actions that architects have done with form, right? And everyday actions are also what architecture is made up of, right? We always think of architecture as the building, but it's also what happens in the building, and it's about the ways people use a building, and it's about the relationships that those buildings produce. So all of this is already going on within architecture. It just hasn't been framed as a kind of thing that we can be poetic with so much. You know, it's usually thought of as something that's fixed, and we rely on assumptions. We don't really talk to people. So this term performance architecture it just kind of became a question that I've been working with for maybe 10 years. And I'm going to be talking about what this term is through my work, right? And there are three main bodies of work. One, at the beginning, the first body of work is what I call architect-performed buildings. So these are buildings that I make and then I live in them, and I'm really focused on the relationships that those buildings produce. The second is called Its Form Will Follow Your Performance. And that's where I renovate people's apartments by not changing anything physically, by just changing the way they behave in it. I basically come up with a performance for them to go and enact in their house, thereby renovating their home. So that's number two. And number three, I call buildings that perform themselves. And buildings that perform themselves are buildings that change over time that I've basically sped up to the speed of a performance. So just that's the kind of trajectory. I'm going to go back to my assumptions, right? Another thing about performance architecture that I think is really cool is its potential to change architecture radically, right? This is what I thought of as sculpture before I really started studying the history of performance art. And then I came across this, and I'm like, oh my God, how cool is this? And so my question, of course, was, you know, okay, so here's what we think of as architecture, and then what does architecture become? Like, okay, performance art changed sculpture in such a radical way. What happens with architecture? So, so this is a very early work. This is a very early work. It's called the Bibarden, and I spent, I don't know, maybe 3 months in the Midwest in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, at the Kohler Plumbing Fixture Company. Do we have anyone from Wisconsin here tonight? Excellent. I love Wisconsin. So this work was before I started really thinking about architecture as performative. It's from 2001. I'd say maybe I started working with performance art as a kind of a deliberate investigation in 2005, 2006, something like that. But retrospectively, I realized that what this toilet is doing is it's giving a sort of complicated set of instructions. When I made this, I was thinking, oh, you know, I want to make a urinal that references an anomalous body, because usually they're serial. They tell us that we have perfect bodies. They get rid of everything that might be messy about our bodies. So this work. Oops, what's going on here, guys? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this work kind of gives an instruction to stand too close to somebody else, right? And it's broken psychologically, except it works perfectly as a urinal. You know, it does everything the urinal wants to do. So thinking about objects and buildings and spaces and everyday things as giving us instructions for how to behave, we can start thinking about architecture as a script for our performance, right? You know, you guys came in here and immediately you knew that you were supposed to sit down somewhere because there are seats everywhere. And the reason you knew that seats were doing that is because you're kind of used to sitting in them, right? But if everyone else was standing on them, that would kind of break your habit of how to use this space. So breaking of habits is a big theme in my work. This is the work that Gary mentioned that's going to be on view at the Museum of Modern Art sometime in this coming year. It's called Counterweight Roommate. And in addition to giving us instructions for how to behave, buildings also produce relationships. So if you think about, well, there's me and you, right? There's this thing, and this stage divides us, right? It creates a you, plural, and a me, right? Like that's, the space is kind of constructing this relationship where I'm kind of delivering something to you guys. And so spaces are doing this all the time. We're just not used to talking about them in that way. So the works that I've made that explore relationships, I make them with another artist named Ward Shelley, who I've been working with for about 10 years, and this is a co-authored piece. There's another view of it. It's a 2-foot wide building with 5 stories in this version. So the bathroom is on the bottom, the kitchen is on the top, and we're each tied around the waist by a rope. And the way that we get from floor to floor is using each other as a counterweight, right? It's called Counterweight Roommate, kind of explains itself. So we meet in the middle, but every time Ward needs to go to the bathroom, I need to go to the kitchen, right? It's kind of like, you know, one puts in, one puts out. But the building basically requires us to cooperate. Like there's no, if we need to do anything, we need to cooperate. And that's what living in this building does for us. And when we do these performances, we occupy them 24 hours a day for a set duration. This one was, I think, 5 days. The one at the MoMA will be 10 days. And you know, a lot of people ask us, well, is this just kind of a stunt that you're doing, you know, living in these things? And my answer to that is, it's how we figure out new work, right? Like what we go into these things thinking we're going to do is often not quite what we wind up experiencing. So cooperation, right? That's what this one was about. I'll talk about some other works later and kind of unpack the pieces that they made. So there's a drawing of it as it will be in the Museum of Modern Art. It's 7 stories instead of 5 so that people could see our beds at night. And we also have that much space. So this is a piece that I just built this summer with Ward, and we build all of our work ourselves. That's part of the fun of it. It's called Reactor. And it's a house for 2 people. There are 2 bedrooms on either side. There's a bedroom on either side. There's a kitchen in the middle, and then there's a deck on either side as well. And some of our buildings move, and this is one of them. So it moves, spins 360 degrees just by the wind blowing it, like a breeze comes along and it just pushes it around. And it also tilts with the weight of us inside, right? So this building is not only kind of setting us up in a situation where we're having to deal with a third thing, with a kind of common, let's call it a rival, and it kind of builds our relationship that way. What wound up happening is that it was just so lovely that that rival became our muse in a way. You know, it was just, we love the wind now. We fell in love with the wind. But because the building tilts, we know exactly where the other guy is and what he's feeling. And yeah, here's a quick video of just kind of more or less what that's like. It's choppy, I don't know why, but anyway, you get the point. Yeah, so we lived in this piece for about 5 days, and we're going to be living in it again in October. If any of you are in New York, it's up in Hudson, near Hudson. Yeah, and so living in these works is a way for us to get to know what the work is actually about. And in addition, it also allows other people to empathize, right? Here's some interior views of what it's like to live in there, right? There's Ward shaving. There's me looking kind of jaunty, right? But I want to talk a little bit about audience through this work. So we talk to people. It's not one of those things where we set up a situation, we go into a museum, and we just sit there and do something without ever interacting with the audience. the audience is actually a big part of what we do. It's how we figure ourselves out as well. So someone will ask us a question one day, and we'll give an answer, and then a couple of days later, someone will ask the same question and we'll give a different answer. And that's because we're kind of figuring it out with them. We're figuring it out with the people that come to see us, and through their questions. It's not that we're lying, we're just like things change over time. So there's another view of it, of Ward figuring it out. And there's a floor plan of it. I get to geek out on my architectural drawings because, you know, I went to school for it, damn it. This is another piece called In Orbit that we worked on. And similar to Counterweight Roommate and Reactor, it's a building that's supposed to produce a relationship. And we were working with this theme of cooperation. But what happened, because Ward is living on top, is it became a lot more about caretaking. It looks like cooperation because the whole house turns as we walk. So we've got like a bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, a desk, a comfortable chair, and a dresser. And in order to use these things, we have to kind of synchronize our walking. We have to kind of do the same thing at the same time. But living on the top of a wheel is very different than living inside of the wheel, because one is convex and the other is concave. And the convex part of it means that when you're going to bed and you put your shoes on the floor, in the morning, they're just kind of going to go away, right? Like by morning, I don't know where they are. They just took off. So I had to be extra careful, and I had to be extra mindful, and I had to pay more attention and not just kind of get lost in my own head. I always had to be aware of Ward and maybe thinking a little bit more about him. And so we're looking to make a new work called Dead Man Friend. We don't know what it looks like yet. That's about caretaking. That's about one guy, an architectural situation that requires one guy to take care of another. So that's In Orbit, and these are some still shots. Kind of strange kind of mirrorings that occur. There's Ward again. This is another work, and you can see that our works kind of build off of one another. This is from 2009. In Orbit was 2014. And this was our second piece together. And like Reactor, it also tilts. It also kind of goes up and down, right? And we lived on this piece for 10 days. Ward on one side, me on the other side, and we wear these jumpsuits so that our audience can see us immediately, right? Like, we want someone who comes to see our work to, without question, know what we're trying to do. We want them to get the kind of relationship that the building is producing immediately, and that's what we want from our audience. That's why we make these kind of red, grand gestures. We think of these buildings as kind of caricatures, right? They're exaggerations of a living condition. And in a caricature, you exaggerate a part of something in order to have it more recognizable. And so we are kind of pulling forward the relationship that we're producing, this kind of cooperation relationship. And this is the first piece that we made together. It's called Flatland. And there were 6 of us living in this situation. It was a 4-story building that's 2 feet wide with 6 living spaces and a kitchen and a bathroom. And there's only 196 square feet in this house. And we could never have a group meeting, right? And that's what led to problems, right? Because if you can't talk to each other, you get, I don't know, you get annoyed by people leaving coffee cups here and there, or why haven't you showered? You really need to shower, because it's, you know, it's only 196 square feet. So in this work, the space kind of produced 2 groups of people. I'll say the kind of like free spirit people and the order people, right? I fall into the order camp. But the free spirit people, you know, they were kind of like much more intuitively engaged with their work. So, they brought in a lot of stuff and they filled their bedrooms up pretty quickly. And then it was like, oh my God, I brought all this stuff, I don't know what to do, but it's like really cramping me. So they would start hanging out too much in the kitchen, and anyway. Memories. So they left after 10 days. It was a 3-week performance, and they're like, look, this is just sucking for us, so we're gonna leave. And that was fine, that was kind of the rule. Like, you can leave at any point, but you can't come back in. Like, that's what we set up for ourselves. But it was the building that did that to us. When we were making this piece, when Ward and I were conceptualizing it, what I had in mind was something akin to an old shoe, right? Where when it's new, it looks kind of like every other shoe that was made. Like, let's think of a sneaker, right? Comes off a mass-produced object. And then you go hiking in it, then you kind of like walk through the rain, you spill some wine on it, and your hammer toe starts to push it out, and it becomes specific, right? Because of its use, because there's a kind of like internal force changing it around. And I thought that that's what this would be, but it was so constrictive that basically everyone just went into themselves and started doing very interior works or a lot of reading. Some detail shots of that. I'm going to go a little bit quickly through this piece. This is one that I did on my own without Ward, but we're going to be revisiting some of the themes that were produced in this one. This one was made for the 2012 Marrakech Biennial. It's called The Rise and Fall. And the image I just showed you was the Royal Theatre. And the mayor of Marrakech in the 80s went to Paris and saw this theater, the Garnier Opera, and he said, wow, this is what we really need here in Marrakech to make us an international city, right? But it's Paris, and there's a history of opera, and it's Morocco, and there's no history of opera. So what wound up happening is they built this building, but never wound up finishing it. It was politically kind of charged. They finished everything around it, so it's a kind of event space, but the main kind of auditorium, that's how it is. That's how it was, that's how it is, that's how it will be, just kind of unfinished. But it made a great place to kind of think about architecture on stage and performance architecture. So I made a work that also tilts, but this one involved the audience. So any of you guys could just come in, right? And there was a record player at either end of this tipping building. So when it would get too far off balance, you would hear the record go and skip. And there was Scheherazade playing, the opera Scheherazade playing, a little clip from it on 2 record players at either end. And these are some other views of that. So this is the range of movement that it has. View from below. There's our record player. So that kind of concludes that. There we go, free architectural advice. It's worth that much. So that kind of concludes the architect perform buildings portion, and now I'm going to go into its form will follow your performance, where I renovate people's houses. So in 2009, I started offering advice to people, right, as a performance. And they would come into a gallery and sit with me for about an hour and talk about their apartment, and then I would give them some ideas, trying to pull out. One of the things I noticed is that people are super strange, like they're really, really weird. And you know what I'm talking about, don't you? So people are really strange, and I'm pretty strange too. And I like not being the strangest person in the room, and I think I'm probably not, right? Because I can bring that out of you if you come for some free architectural advice. And you take the strangest thing about a person, and you make that part of the architecture. You make it specific to that person in the way they use it, not in the way that it looks, but in the way they interact with it. There's a quote by Winston Churchill, "We make our buildings thereafter they make us," that has always resonated. It's like, okay, well, I walk into the space, it's telling me what to do, I'm doing that thing, it's making me, but then I'm going to rebel against it, and I'm going to just rip these seats out, so I've made it, and then it's like this kind of ongoing process of going back and forth. So anyway, we're talking and talking. And ultimately, I come up with some sort of advice for them. And this is one called OK Boyfriend. So I was working with a performance artist named Mandy O'Connell in Berlin. And she said, Alex, you know, my room is tiny here. I only pay 200 euros a month for it, and I can't afford anything else, but I need a studio space, and it's just not going to happen in here. So I said, well, why don't we renovate your bedroom so that it's more like a studio, right? Like, let's figure out how to use it differently. It doesn't need to be bigger. So tell me a little bit about what you're exploring as a performance artist right now. And she said, well, I'm looking into femininity as an act of endurance. Like, part of being a woman for me is enduring something. You either endure childbirth, or you endure, you endure discrimination, there are all these acts of endurance that are feminine, right? And she's kind of trying to figure this out. So first thing we did for her renovation was we came up with these kind of bodily positions in her room that she would hold for a while, but that felt very, very derivative of artists like Gina Pane, let's say. And so I said, okay, wait, this isn't working. We've got to change course. Tell me what you're enduring in your room architecturally. And she said, this loft. Immediately, it was like, wham, I know what I'm enduring. I know what is just doing my head in. And it's this loft, because it's really so poorly made that I can't sleep up there. And I can't sleep up there, much less bring someone else up there, right? And so it's just become this kind of receptacle for suitcases, boxes, water bottles, things that you just don't want to deal with. So I said, okay, well, that's great. Tell me a little bit more about it. She said, well, I feel like this loft is like a boyfriend who's just okay, right? You know what I'm talking about too, these okay boyfriends. So she said, you know, sometimes he's great and he'll pick me up from the airport and that's really nice. And sometimes I roll over and I just think to myself, are you still here? These are her words, and she's fabulous. So anyway, so I said, yeah, now this is it. You see what I'm talking about, how deeply strange people are? It's like, oh yeah, that loft is my boyfriend. Anyway, so we ran with this idea, and I said, okay, well, there are two things that you can do with an okay boyfriend. You can either make him a little worse or a little better. And it's a lot easier to make him worse, so let's try that first. So we made him a little worse by putting all of the crap that she had stored up there up to the front, and I was kind of like behind there, and then I trapped myself in there, and I needed to get out, and so I broke through the loft. I'm like, okay, there you go, he's worse. What do you want to do with him? So she said, I'll live with him for a couple of weeks. And then, you know, first she was like, yeah, no, actually, I kind of like it. It's a change. 2 weeks later, I get an email, you know, you remember that really cute thing about the way he chewed his food in the beginning? Well, now it's super annoying. So I'm going to break up with okay boyfriend. So she moved everything back, put it back. And then she was like, wow, you know, through this process, I realized that what I really want is a boyfriend. I'm 28 years old. I've, you know, had sex, and, you know, she's attractive and smart, but, you know, like, it's just scary to have a boyfriend to me. So I've got this really great idea. I'm going to find a boyfriend for a year, and it's going to be a performance, and we're going to be explicit about the fact that this is a performance boyfriend, right, called actual boyfriend. So she looked and looked and looked for a guy to be her actual boyfriend for a year, but it didn't work out. Like, she couldn't, it was too complicated. Do we sleep together? Do we see other people? What do we do? Couldn't do it. So anyway, this photograph here is the corollary of a floor plan for a performative renovation. So you see certain architectural conventions, but I dress up like my clients, and then I go to their house and I do the thing, and then I'm photographed doing the thing, and then that photograph hangs in their space as a kind of instruction for them to do this performance that will renovate their house. So that's what this image is. So there's me dressing up like Mandy, there's me dressed up like she said her boyfriend would look. Anyway, boyfriend never happened, but she started working for her mentor. And her mentor is obviously a lot older than she is. She was doing things like cooking and keeping him company, taking him to museums, you know, At 84, he needed a little extra help, and so he was paying her to just kind of help him out. It's never been a sexual relationship, but they got married, right? Because it just made sense, right? There are ways in which getting married makes some sense. And one of the things that made sense is that he's got his own place, and it's a really nice place in a really great area of Berlin, and she's got a crap place in Kreuzberg, which is, you know, kind of an edgier area. So they got married, and now they spend some of their week at his house, and some of the week she stays at her house, like having sex. And in the other house, she's not having sex, but she's like performing a marriage, right? She's doing those things like that she really loves. It's, you know, she's got routine, she's got company, she's got things she needs to do and purposes that when she's in her other room, it's just like, you know, time can pass and it can just like get sucked into some vortex. So that's not happening anymore. So she goes to that vortex sometimes, and sometimes she goes to a very structured environment. And so her renovation was really about enacting a different part of herself in different places that she can't quite hold together in the same place. Like it feels too restrictive to always be at Andre's, and too kind of like messy to just be at hers. So yeah. These are other instructions for different renovations. I renovated someone's apartment to make it into a restaurant, and so we wound up serving food in bed and in the bathroom and everything like that. So I'm going to go now to that kind of concludes the free architectural advice that I'll give you. I still do this work. If any of you want some free architectural advice, I'm happy to give some. This is now sort of starting the buildings that perform themselves. So this is a piece called A Sack of Rooms All Day Long. And it's basically 4 rooms from an 800 square foot house that are stuffed into the skin of a 500 square foot house, right? And they inflate at different times. The exterior skin doesn't inflate, it's just like there, and these are put in it. But then these rooms on the inside, they come on and off at different times, and at a certain point, that exterior skin becomes a restriction, and the living room needs to steal space from the dining room, which then like pushes the bathroom out of the way, and the kitchen goes away. So it starts off as this, so this sequence that you saw takes about 8 hours, and is sped up really a lot. But that speeding up, you know, I sped this thing up for you because we don't have much time together, unfortunately. But I've also sped up a building. It's full scale. It's like, I don't know, 30 feet by 20 feet by 12 feet high. And its scale is exactly like any other space that you're going to confront, any architectural space, except it's moving and it's changing over time. And I've sped this thing up to a performance, to something that you might perceive as a performance. And I've also drawn the lines as an architect would draw a building or a floor plan. I've used line weight. So sometimes things are really chaotic, and you can start to see some elements, and then others kind of go away. But then something like a staircase and some windows appear. So it's this building that's kind of like going from formlessness to something that's recognizable. You know, it's just kind of moving between something that's really messy and something that's super familiar. And it's not two different things. It's when you look at it, not what you're looking at. So this work was kind of one of the first works that I made after really studying performance art. And I've come a long way since then. You know, the last body of work that I showed you, the It's Formal, Follow Your Performance, is a lot closer to something that I think really challenges those boundaries between performance art and architecture. This doesn't make this work a bad piece, but just I needed to make this thing in order to get other places, right? And so this work is much more like a traditional sculpture, where you go and you look at it, right? You see it, You stand there, you think about it. And while I was in the museum, kind of listening to what people were saying about it, I overheard someone said, well, yeah, but how do you get in? And it's that urge for a space or a thing to pull you into it that really kind of makes a very kind of blurry boundary between subject and object, between spectator and viewed. You know, it just becomes a lot less clear who's who, right? But, you know, oh, I'm in it, but I'm able to look at it. You know, these kinds of things are interesting to me. So I started then making works that you enter, inflatable works that you enter, and started to think about the changes that occur as changes in the script. Just like I was talking about your chairs as a kind of cue for how to behave, this is a doorway. And immediately you look at it, you know, oh yeah, I passed through it, just like I'm doing. But at a certain point, one form starts to steal space from the other form. There's this kind of inflatable mirrored form on top that sucks all of the air coming out of the one on the bottom. This piece is called Snowballing Doorway. I've put the titles of all these works here. I hope you can see them if I forget to mention them. So this is in process of the score. I'm going to call it a score for how to behave. The score changes, right? It says in one moment, pass through, and then it becomes really gooey, and then it says don't pass through. So it's just this thing kind of sucking the same volume of air back and forth all day long. And here's a quick video. Just, when I started working with inflatables, I really liked their quality, not of like complete finished forms, but rather something that's transitional. I like the idea that architecture can be gooey and leaky and, you know, kind of fleshy like my body. Like, this is not the kind of architecture that we're used to seeing. But, you know, it's architecture. It's big. You can go in it. It tells you what to do. It just asks different things from you than architecture usually does. This is a work that I made right after Snowballing Doorway called Roomograph. And it's a glow-in-the-dark piece. So it's a room that takes your picture, and it entices you into it with fur, right? You have to think about like, oh, well, you know, here comes someone through the gallery door. What's going to make them want to come and engage with this thing? What's going to make them want to come sit down? Fur. Who doesn't like fur, right? So I found this glow-in-the-dark fur. And when you sit in it, when you're still, the lights, which are UV lights, they kind of take a picture. So here's an example of that. Just like one of those old photographs, right, where they would just lay things on a photosensitive paper. They were called rayograms, right? And then you would expose that paper and you would get this kind of image, kind of a one-to-one image of the things that were laid on this paper, but they were a bit distorted. And the same thing happens with the person who enters the room. And I found that at the end of these people's experiences with this piece, that they would actually start, this is I guess 2011, so it's, you know, selfies were a thing. I wasn't doing them at that time, but they were a thing. But people have become so used to their own awareness about their image and the ways that they produce images, that they start changing their behavior. You know, they start looking differently, they start posing. So people, once they realized that this piece was actually recording their occupation of it photographically, they started posing. You know, it's like they would like lay on it, kind of something like that, and they would take a different kind of picture in it. So that relationship of space and behavior and how a space can really entice you to act differently is again kind of tapping into this idea of performance art and architecture. And I came up with that term performance architecture because I do rely so heavily on the thinking that's been developed in performance art. This is a work from this year called Slowly Ceiling. It's basically a big room with a big carpet and 2 sofas on it. And then the carpet starts to inflate, right? It starts to just swell up. and it pushes the two sofas, which were originally facing back to back, it rotates them 90 degrees and makes a bed out of them that the two people who are laying down in them see. So that's a view of it. I installed this piece this summer. There's a museum in north of Germany. So there are the two sofas. You know, there's a carpet. Looks nice. There it is from another angle. And then the carpet just starts to fill with air, right? And it just gets a little bit fatter until someone who you were not in sort of face-to-face contact with, they're now right there. You were just on different couches, kind of doing your own thing, and then the architecture forces you together in this very, very intimate kind of nose-to-nose situation. And it also pushes everyone out of the room, right? Because it fills the entire room. So that view that we saw where it was nice and open, the whole room is filled with this piece. And that's one of the things I like about inflatables. Number one, they're big. They're kind of architecturally scaled. So you can start to run experiments with them. You can start to test things out on a real scale and see how it feels. They also don't break, right? It's easy to fix them. You have to like slash them to break them, but you can ship them. You can ship something that's enormous that could fill this stage for not so much money and not have to use an art handler, right? Like that's kind of an advantage. And you know, you need to think about these things because you know, being an artist is kind of a marathon, right? You have to just find a way of, you know, staying with it. At a certain point, you're the only one left, I guess. So this work is the one that I premiered at Wasserman Projects called The Sound in the Future. And it is basically, I started thinking about inflatables in many ways, right? This piece was this year. I started thinking about a dance floor, right? I had this, I like dancing. So I go out to clubs and I dance, and I'm not very good at it, but there's a lot of enthusiasm there. And when I was living in Berlin for a while, and there's this club called Berghain, which is just one of the most amazing clubs I've ever been in. And it's in this old electric factory, and I really fell in love with techno music there. And you know, you get obsessed about something, you learn its history, and I learned that, oh my God, like techno music is from Detroit. So this work, as Gary mentioned, is a kind of homage to Detroit techno, right? What I think is amazing about Detroit's history with techno music is that the artists who, at the very beginning, sort of came up with this new sound, this new way of making music, was that they took the things that had put them out of a job and made their lives miserable, which are these kind of electronic robot things, right? Automation kind of just was not so good for them, for their community, at least. But they then took those sounds that automation made, and they started making music to it, and they started dancing to it, and there's like, wow, you know, I'm just going to take it back. I'm just going to take it back. So for me, techno music is not just like a good dance beat. It's also quite political and social. And anyway. So this work is silver, as you see, and furry, and it's the same form repeated 6 times. So it makes this 15-foot square cube. It moves very slowly, and so I took one of my favorite techno pieces, and I slowed it down from 50 minutes from 5 minutes to 50 minutes, right? So it's now like super low, and it's almost like Buto. So it's kind of techno meets Buto. Also, while I was in Berlin, I realized that the best dance floor is a small dance floor. So this work kind of moves around the space that it's installed in, always making it smaller, always kind of like pushing back up against the people who are in it. And it just changes shape all the time. It kind of engorges and disgorges. Fans come on and off. It's got about an hour-long cycle, but you know, there's no right or wrong way for this thing to go. It's just kind of doing its thing. Another inflatable installation that I want to talk about is called Wall-to-Wall, Floor-to-Ceiling. This one is in Tel Aviv, and it's in the Tel Aviv Art Museum. And the space that I was given was enormous. It was absolutely huge. So it's good that I worked with inflatables because you could just kind of like come along and put some few of them in there and they take up the whole space. So it's maybe 120 feet long by 40 feet, and that's the gallery space, but the ceiling height is only 9 feet. So you had this very kind of compressed thing. You had this very compressed space. And I installed, whoa, we seem to have a hiccup, guys, that's not appearing on my thing. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, that's good. There we go. No problem now. So there are 6 forms that are attached to the ceiling which are white, and 6 forms on the ground that are gray. And parts of them have fur on them. So you can see in your upper left-hand corner, there's a kind of seat-like form with hair on it. There are bed forms and doorway forms also. They come and go as the space reconfigures. So there's the bed form. So these forms are always just pushing each other out of the way, using this really, really low ceiling as an advantage to create a space that's always changing. And you can kind of pass through the middle of these forms, and they reorient the pathway. So the space is always changing. It's volatile. There's someone sitting on the bed. And I'm really much more attracted to these kind of interstitial moments, these kind of in-between things that happen, where that doorway that you just passed through is now kind of flaccid, right? It's just like it melted or something. And then it comes back. It comes and goes. So there we have it. There's that doorway. There's the bed again. This is the last work I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to, as Christina said, I'm going to take questions outside on Liberty Plaza near this piece. So this work kind of combines a lot of things that I've been working about. That's why I saved it for last, because it's kind of a hybrid of things. In 2013, I was asked to make a work for the Biennial of the Americas, they called it, and that's in Denver. So the city of Denver said, okay, we're selecting you 4 architects to take on these challenging sites in our downtown area and come up with just an idea for what you could do with it. I was given parking lots. You can see, these kind of asphalt parking lots. They're all over downtown. There are a lot of them, way more than there need to be. And they're not good uses of urban space. They're just kind of hot in the summer. Nothing goes on. So they said, okay, do something with that, but you can't actually change anything physically about them because we have a law that says if you change anything about this parking lot, then you can no longer use it as a parking lot. But fortunately, parking lots are things that things can move in and out of. So I did a little bit more research, and I found that a lot of these parking lots had applications into the buildings department requesting permission to build a hotel there. I thought, well, okay, I'm going to make a really tiny hotel that drives from place to place, practicing hotel. Like, let's see if it's a good place to put a hotel, right? So I came up with this project called the Hotel Rehearsal. And it's a 1-room hotel, but unlike an RV, you have a great view because it's an urban project. So this thing goes about 30 feet in the air, and it's got a bed, and a sofa that kind of push each other out of the way like a pop-up book. It's got a shower in there, it's got a toilet, it's got a sink. So all of these things are inside. It's air conditioned, it's got lights, curtains, all of that. So here it is in the morning, right, just doing its thing in downtown Denver. There's my assistant sleeping in it. Then she wakes up, inflates the sofa, moves to another location. There it is, kind of down, and then you turn the fans on, and it goes up, and that's the view from inside. So, this work is not only practicing a location, it's practicing a view. Like, oh, what kind of view do I have from here? So it's more, for me, this work isn't so much about like literally testing whether it's a good spot for a hotel or not, or whether it's a good view or not. But what is intriguing to me is The idea that architectural space can be practiced and rehearsed and iterative, like you could do something and then change it and then do it a little differently the second time. And that's not the way we think about architecture. We think about architecture as, okay, well, we're gonna like plan this thing for 10 years, and then we're gonna build it, and if it's not right, too bad, right? Thinking more about space in terms of its performative qualities, I think has the potential of radically transforming the way we think of architecture. Gary mentioned that I got my PhD, and I did that almost tongue-in-cheek because I wanted someone to call me doctor, right? So thank you, Gary, for using my new title. Because I want to practice architecture as a doctor. You know, those sessions were a lot like a therapy session. And I thought to myself at first, oh God, you know, am I really doing this soft-headed thing where I, you know, talk about people's feelings about the way their apartment is, and that's really lame. But then it became really cool, right? I'm like, okay, well, if that's what it is, I'm gonna run with it. And I'm gonna be that role of a therapist. So what does it mean when architecture is only produced in dialogue? And these things actually work. You know, these renovations, they have real impacts on people. Not anything that's trying to fix a problem, but it's more about how can I, as an architect, help someone become who they would like to be through the space that they live in, right? And that's a really interesting way of thinking about something, not approaching it from a sort of more traditional way of like, oh, let me get to know you, what are your habits, and how can I make a house for you that really suits who you are, right? I want to make a house that suits who you are, thinking, in fact, that we're fixed beings. Like, we're not. You know, we're changing all the time. We get tired of things. We get excited about things that once repulsed us. You know, like my relationship with performance art and the way I opened it up with chickens and chocolate, you know, like that was one day, and then I spend a little time with it and I'm like, wow, I want to make my life's work about this thing. So we change. So buildings aren't necessarily great at conceptualizing those who use them as changing. So anyway, that's the potential I see in this kind of work, and it's, you know, hopefully some of you guys will find it interesting and incorporate it into your practice, not in the way I do it, but make it your own. Like, that's super exciting for me. If you think this is interesting, then hack it, you know, and make it your own. Like, that's great. So then the curtains go up again, and my assistant goes to sleep, and that's her view from the roof. So I'm just going to leave this on. This is my kind of closing video. I want you to see a little bit about, you know, since it's not going to be driving around and I can't have people up into it tonight, I just wanted to let you guys get a sense of like what it looks like in action. So again, here's the view. There are always fans running. Then the curtains come down. And the bed will transform into a sofa in a minute just by kind of flipping a switch in that pop-up book way. I was super excited when that actually happened. All right, here's the money shot. There it is. Ta-da! I love that. I never get tired of watching that. Okay, so with that, with the money shot, I'm going to say goodnight to everyone. Thank you so much for your attention. And I'll see you at the hotel rehearsal, Liberty Plaza.